Is the controller coming and we're gonna?
He's supposed to, but, you know.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am calling the special Mount Vernon Urban Renewal Agency meeting in order. Can you please read the special announcement for Ann?
Yes, ma'am. There was a special meeting notice for the Mount Vernon Urban Renewal Agency. Please be advised that the Mount Vernon Urban Renewal Agency will hold a regular meeting on Tuesday, April 29th at 1 p.m. in the Mayor's Conference Room, 1 Roosevelt Square, Mount Vernon, New York, 10550. Note this public meeting will be live streamed on Facebook. And for more information, please contact Pam Tarlow, Secretary of the Urban Renewal Agency at ptarlow@cmvny.com. And also had my phone number at 914-840-4032. Nobody has called me, and we also published in the newspaper last week.
Thank you. You can call the roll
Yes, Madam Chair, Chairman Sean Patterson-Harris,
here.
Vice Chair, Danielle Brown,
Here.
Treasurer Sprill,
Here.
Assistant Treasurer Morton,
Here.
and Member Johnson.
Here.
5 and a quorum.
Oh, we can proceed with the agenda.
Sure, so we have, resolutions to consider. First resolution is 2025-10, resolution to write off bad debt from the auditors for fiscal year 2020.
Chair and board, as you know, we have been working to get the audits completed through the single audit system. It was specifically listed by HUD as a requirement, and we have been working diligently to try to get the audits completed. 2020 was a difficult audit to do. And as part of that, the auditors made recommendations to us to write off certain bad debt. I got the list of bad debt, which you have attached to the resolution there at $874,509.09. When I went to look to see if that debt was listed and recorded as it should have been at the county on the land board, on the land use site, none of these loans were recorded. Because of that, and because they do not exist at this point in time with the same owners potentially on the property addresses, that kind of thing, there is no way that they are collectible at this point in time. That's unfortunate. And moving forward, we're going to ensure that we have a policies and procedure in place to make sure that we do record, as we should have previously, to be able to collect liens, mortgages, and other debt.
Well, I think it's really important while we're talking about fiscal year 2020, that these loans were all taken between March, I think the oldest one that is showing here, March of 1984.
March. Yeah, you're right.
March of 1984, Valcour Shoe. So March of 1984, and the last loan on this list being dispersed in 2015. So these were all loans that were provided and given through the Mount Vernon Urban Renewal Agency over multiple administrations.
But none of them this
Way before this administration, before the controller became the controller, before the mayor became the mayor, even before this mayor was the planning commissioner and urban renewal executive director for the period of time in March 17th, 2016 to December 14th, 2016.
And if I may, Mayor, there was an attorney specific for the URA.
I'm going to speak to that.
Okay, good.
Because I have.
Thank you. Yes.
It was in 2016 for the 9 months that I was commissioner and executive director of Urban Renewal Agency, and we were trying to work on the 2015 audit. We were dealing with these bad debts. There's even more than this that are not addressed on here yet, but there are more. There are probably almost another $1 million more in bad loans. that were given, or they were loans that were given. And at that time, the Urban Renewal Agency attorney was Mr. Greg Young, who has since deceased. He died several years ago. And way back then, none of these loans had the paperwork processed through the Westchester County Clerk. Since it had not been submitted to the Westchester County Clerk, the city of Mount Vernon could not go back and place liens on these properties. During 2016, when I was commissioner and the executive director, at that time, Attorney Will Wagstaff had gone in to investigate all of these to see if they were collectible. I said back then that I didn't believe they were collectible, but then I was gone. Come back to about 2020, when I came back into office, we started talking about at this body some of these same loans. And then when the comptroller came into office in 2022, again, he said, let's have a pause on writing off these loans because we want to do another round of due diligence to make sure am I correct on that, Comptroller?
That's correct.
So we've discussed these loans in 2016, when I was Urban Renewal Agency Commissioner. We discussed these loans in 2020, when I became mayor. We discussed these loans again in 2022, in 2016, in 2020, and for the third time in 2022, I think we've established that these monies were uncollectible. Most of these businesses, if not all of them, have gone out of business. There were some rehab loans for small loans, 10,000, 7,000, things like that for people's home properties. Because at that time, we did use monies to provide rehabilitation loans to private owners of properties for like a roof or a handicap ramp or something that allowed them to keep their whole home into code. And I'm taking this time because, of course, you know, in true fashion, there's going to be conversations about these must be their friends. This must be some personal hookup. This is corruption. This is incompetence. I want to say again, for the record, I don't know what we're going to decide to do when this vote comes up in a few moments, but these loans go back to 1984. I was a high school student in 10th grade. Right? And they go through the 2015, for which I, nor the comptroller, nor the council president, nor Brian Johnson were involved, or nor Commissioner Sproul.
Well, actually, I was a treasurer.
You was the treasurer, but you were the treasurer for
13 to 15.
so from 13 to 15, but clearly in 1984, when you graduated from Mount Vernon High School, you were not an employee of the Urban Renewal Agency nor the treasurer.
Nor did I have responsibility for filing the mortgage documents or anything else, but nevertheless.
No, I'm going to say that because, you know, there's always so many, you know, we have done our due diligence and we have carried this debt. And every year that we carry this debt, it shows up on our audits. Every year it shows up on our audits. We have to spend extra money to have the auditors look at the same debt that they know is uncollectible, write a report on the debt that's not collectible. And so we're spending money each year just for them to say that this debt is not collectible. And so we don't have to vote on it. So people don't accuse us of not doing our job and being in cahoots with some people that we don't even know and who had businesses before we were even, some of us may be born. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I just feel very strongly about this because we've been carrying this and we've been talking about this for a long time. And so since we're in the public, I want to put it on the public record and I want to be clear. And because it is also election season, which we also refer to as silly season, not that it's not silly outside of election season. I want to be very clear for the critics so that you can have the facts before you become very brave social media typing warriors who talk about everything that they don't know and accuse people of upstanding character about making decisions that they don't even understand. So, yes.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that I got this list
Mhm.
and I, who have been with the city less than 6 months and am not a political activist in the city, went through every single one of these projects. We went to the county site. to confirm that these projects were not collectible. And every single of the 25 projects, there were multiple projects that didn't even have the owner the same as the address, because the owner has long since sold that property. That, of course, also made it uncollectible on a different level. So I just wanted to say that even if you, I mean, you look at the age, you look at the fact they come up every year, that there's cost associated, and the fact that an independent staff person who has no vested interest in making these collectible or uncollectible has reviewed them, they are not collectible. And the auditors actually agree with that as well. So that is why I've asked you today to please write off this bad debt so that we don't continue spending money for the URA for these audits where we go in circles over and over again. And by the way, our accountant has to be involved over and over again. So there's soft costs and hard costs associated with continuing with this debt, reviewing this.
In actuality, the auditors wanted to recommend off several years ago, I think, as the mayor said before, and we basically pushed back and said we're going to hold on, let's try to continue due diligence. The hope was that we were going to be able to find somewhere something that had been executed, at least that was a firm contract or something to be able to do, to be able to move forward with this. So I think that, yeah, unfortunately, and it definitely gives me kind of real, I can't even say it's agita. I think I'm at this point with indigestion on the fact that we have to do this, but I think it's no longer, can we kind of kick the can down the road on these things. My concern is twofold. One, you know, the ones that actually like huge, like this $250,000 loan, 15 to this organization itself. Do we even know what that was for? That's because that's just, so that's a, I mean, the other ones are kind of like 40.
Not 2.2.
250,000.
But he said 2.2 and then he said 200 is not 2.2 million.
2014.
$250,000.
I believe most of these were rehab loans. Some of them might have
That
been
was a
home
business?
projects. No, I believe that one was a person. It's a strange name, but the person didn't exist. So I think it was a person. I put it in as a,
It was I believe Huda Hemed was a small corporation and they might have owned a property that they were doing rehab in.
they don't anymore.
Because all of these are CD rehab loans. CD rehab loans are accounting for 701,000, and of that 701,000, the bad debt write-off is 571,811.68. Then we have two deferred loans of names of people, but no dates of the loan amount or the date that it was entered into. We have small minority loans, one of them Amazon Big Drop. We don't know when that was executed. And then we have community development, rental rehab loans, none of which we know the loan amounts for all of them. We know the balances for all of them, but we don't know the dates in which any of these loans were even executed. And so again, you know, we're talking about stuff going back now 41 years. Yeah, you weren't born then.
I mean, they reached the 10-year mark now, which is, you know, from at least the audit and accounting perspective, that makes sense. I think that was one of the reasons why I was reluctant in 2022 and 2023, because we had not yet hit the 10-year mark to kind of write this off. We now at the 10-year mark, I mean, for all of these or more on it. My other question is, so because this was HUD money and so on and so on, is there any fallout or backlash? What is the with HUD around the fact that we now have to write these off? I just want to make sure that there's nothing that the city is going to have to pay back, right, on it.
No.
And speaking of which, and while I'm on that,
Yes.
there's another one, right, that is on the list of loans that is not on here to be written off, but that was executed actually in 2000, I don't know, 2014, I think, maybe somewhere around about that, which is the Atlantic Development Loan Project, that one. Two, with Mr. Fine.
I'm
Keep
going,
Fine, and then, but let's just make sure we got all of those documents for that one, because that one doesn't need to be written on. That's a huge amount.
The mayor did say that there would be another $1 million over time, and I don't, because again, fairly new, I don't know where that is going to be. When we decide to write off the loan as uncollectible, it's because we have no contact with the owner. We don't know how to find them. We don't have a contract that would allow us to independently go to court.
Very much that. What I'm trying to make sure is that we don't get to that place.
so we have the
Where we
Atlantic,
don't have no contact with those, particularly that particular project.
we
Okay.
have, because this board recently voted on the Atlantic Development contract, and we just did some type of amendment to their contract with Blue Rio, right? So we have their contract, we have their documents, we know where they are. I guess the one thing we should do is make sure that that was filed. That lien was filed, so we can follow up, since that was pre all of us also. If we could make sure that that loan agreement was filed with the county clerk, so that at any such time that it might need to be enforced for the collection of that loan, that it is enforceable. So let's make sure that the loan itself and any loan amendment documents are in with the county clerk's office, so we don't have to go back to this. The other thing is, when it comes to loans from CDBG, from home, from things of that nature, that is the city's money's allocation. We give it out in loans. Each year we get a certain statutory allocation. That allocation is ours. We give it, we can grant it, we can loan it. If we grant it, it doesn't come back. If we loan it, it comes back as a very low interest loan over time. And the monies that we recover, we get to keep. They don't go back to HUD. And what if it was done properly? This money would be money that would have been recycled year over year, enabling us to have monies in future years going above and beyond what our annual allocation is. So we'll say we have an allocation of $500,000 a year, right? But we had $2 million in loans out. If those $2 million of loans were paid back, then we would have our annual allocation plus the revenue from the loan paybacks that would have been coming in, and that money could have continued to be used to go back out for home rehabilitation loans, to go out for economic development loans for businesses like the facade program that we used to have in the city. But because these loans were not properly executed or filed with the county, because the city has not been able to collect on these, it's monies that are lost, but these monies are not required to be paid back to HUD. And so, clearly we know that these were not good practices. We weren't responsible for them, but we are the ones who are sitting here now who have to make the decisions to write off the bad debt. But it also, we clearly have all of the blueprint for what not to do, right? That's very clear of what we cannot do. And I think that's very clear, and we're all very aware of that. And trust me, if we bring anything like this back into fruition, which I think it's important to be able to give out loans to small businesses for their facades, for the upgrades of their businesses, not doing that, Fourth Avenue could be greatly helped by us being able to recycle money like this, and Gramerton Avenue or Third Street, any of our business corridors, so in the future, as we go forward, that is the biggest that's the biggest learned lesson from this, is to ensure that all executed contracts are filed with the county clerk's office. Can't speak as to why they weren't before. The person who was responsible for doing that is no longer alive on this earth, so we can't go back to them, but we do know how to move forward. But I wanted to make you understand that we don't have to pay any of these monies back to HUD.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I know that, you know, the reason why that building on Fifth Avenue and Third Street stayed there for as long as it did
Uh-huh.
was because we kept hearing from the previous executive director that there was but so much that we could do. Otherwise, we would end up having to pay back millions of dollars for that, because that also was something that was brought up in related money. So I just want to make sure. I mean, I hear it, so if that's what you're saying, fine. I just want to make sure that we don't end up later on where it comes to this now that we hear from HUD, especially what's going on in Washington, that we now got to pay back money that,
No.
you know.
If we would have sold that building, right, or years ago, then that money would have just again come back into HUD as unrestricted funds, right? But we didn't do anything, and so we just continue to add taxes on the building, which makes the building totally underwater.
Right.
And anybody who wants to buy that building, you know, that
Actually, the taxes didn't get added onto the building based upon that. The taxes got added onto the building at the time it was the city took ownership back on it. And they never waived off the taxes from the time that it was no longer belonging to the city. So it wasn't while we owned it that the taxes got kind of cured upon it.
If I may,
I just need to make sure, because I hear what the mayor's saying, I hear what you're saying. That's not the message that
well, unless the
I've gotten before.
there's a difference as to when the problem occurs. The first question you ask is, does the project that you are about, or activity you're about to enter into, meet a national objective? If it meets a national objective as a CD rehab project would, then you can spend the money. And if you decide to spend it as a grant, or you decide to do it as a loan, as the mayor said, that's totally our discretion. The problem we had, and I don't know exactly what happened on that property, it's one of those things I need to investigate, frankly. But I think there was question about what the national objective was when we took the property. If it doesn't meet the national objective, which would allow it to occur under the HUD guidelines, then we would have to pay back the money. It's not we should never have taken it out. That's the difference. Where in the process and the kind of activity we're using it for. These small business loans and rehab loans, those are clearly under the national objective. So there's no issue here about that. When the money would have come back, it would have come back as program income. We would have been able to spend it again, which would have been great for the city. Unrestricted. Mostly unrestricted. We would have had additional admin money out of it. There would have been some nice things.
I think only a percentage of it would have been unrestricted, right? Because my understanding is that there's only a percentage of it that comes back that is unrestricted, not the whole
It
thing.
depends on whether it's revolving loan money or
Okay.
it's how it's labeled. And we decide what the label is based on what we do with it.
program income money and it comes.
It's unrestricted. If it's revolving loan money, it is restricted.
Yeah.
And we could have said, this is all program income money. We could have made that label on it, had the money come back. There is a loss to the city of $874,000, but that loss is something we can't fix now.
I get it.
And that is kind of the point I keep trying to hopefully make. HUD knows that it can't be fixed either.
I just want to make sure, I think it's important to have this discussion.
Yes.
And have it openly, because we oftentimes have these discussions, not unnecessarily, and then also we get the yang and the talk that just goes out there because people don't have all that information. I think somebody's doing something peculiar underhandedly. Nobody wants to write off anything. But the bottom line is, what we also don't want is to keep carrying these kind of findings that's in the audit report, especially if we're trying to get to a place where we know that we need to try to restore our credit rating. We don't want these kind
Exactly.
of things continuing. So therefore, unfortunately, we got to bite the bullet, take it from now, and then get prepared for what we need to do next and moving forward. Put in the guardrails, put in the procedures and all of that to make sure that we don't have this issue, as you and I discussed previously,
Yes.
going forward. Because we should be doing loans to help people with their facades and help people with this stuff. But if you don't have the right mechanism and system in place, then that's the reason why we halted it, because we just didn't have that in place.
Yeah.
The noticeable disadvantage of carrying open receivable is far reaching because the financials then are really projecting something that's not really, I want to say true.
Not an asset.
It's not an asset. It's not a
Yeah.
true asset. And the balance sheet is upside down. It's uncollectible. We're not going to collect it. We've already, what, 40 years?
40 years, as long as 40 years.
40 years.
As recent as 10, anywhere between 10 and 40 years.
Yeah.
So we're accumulating this projected receivable as income. So the balance sheet is $1 million off, $874,000 off. And that's not good. And Dr. Morton is absolutely correct. We're trying to get to a place where we have a balance sheet and financial report that actually forecasts the accuracy of the city's fiduciary accountability. And I don't think they have a choice.
Council President,
I agree.
our Council President had her.
No, it's all right. I can go after you guys.
I'm finished.
Okay, I just had some questions for clarity. So I'm looking at the bad debt allowance versus the loan. Some of them are, the bad debt allowance is lower. Is that because we initially received payments?
That's correct.
Okay, so we don't know the loan amount for the deferred loans, but we know that there's we know the bad debt allowance. Is that because we can't find any documentation saying that
That's
exists?
correct.
Got you. And I guess my concern is obviously moving forward that we don't end up in the situation that everyone has spoken to. So when exactly are the processes and procedures going to be put in place? I heard Comptroller mentioning a program that needs to be filed, and I'm kind of good at reading facial expressions. It looks like that one may not have been filed yet.
No, I think it was.
It was.
Yeah,
No, no.
closed, what, about a month?
No, at least.
Yeah, before, yeah.
Yeah.
Filed with the county.
I'll get you all, I'll get the whole board, the filed county clerk, notice.
Just the first page.
And
Yeah.
that was a loan that was issued back in 2016. The loan was not issued with all of the HUD rules and regulations included in it. And it was 2016 or 2015 or what, you said 2014?
15, I think.
So 2015 again before, because I did get there in 2016, so it was in 2015 or maybe late 2014. It did not include some of the language that HUD wanted in there. That had been filed. And so it was a finding in our HUD program audit. And so over a few month period, we negotiated with the Blue Rio company, which owns 203 Gramerton. And we came up with with an amendment to that whole loan and the repayment terms and the operation terms. And that amendment has also been, as he's just stated, filed with the county. So
I guess my concern is really around continuity, right? So, Director, if you decide that you want to retire tomorrow, how do we make sure the next person that steps into your place will know to do this and get it done?
Before we execute any new projects, there will be a policy and procedure in place for that project. That's best practice. And I have every intention of making sure that happens. So before you guys ever see us appear before you and say, I recommend that you do this housing project, or I recommend that you do this rehab project, there will be a policy and procedure that you will have already approved. So that is just best practice. And you will get that from me.
And to make it clearer, currently, we do not have a housing rehabilitation program, loan program. Currently, we do not have a small business loan grant or rehabilitation program. And prior to us establishing it and putting out an application, all of those policies and procedures will be done, brought before this board and approved. And before we put out an application and before we receive the applications and execute the applications, we'll make sure, again, that all of those projects have been approved. And when those contracts are executed, we will also make sure that we get a report that all of those contracts and those agreements have been filed with the county clerk as based on the policies that we've done. So, I mean, there are several steps we don't have, and the city has not had in at least 10 years, a housing rehabilitation program, a small business loan program. So before we reestablish that and even put it in our annual plan, right? Because we have to even put it in our annual plan that goes to HUD and gets approved before we can even establish it. So we're certain steps away from it. And so we have time to make sure that as it is being developed this time, that is being developed properly with all of the regulations, the rules, the processes, the procedures that we require, and launch it from there.
There have been two things that we have done that has been already been different. The vote on the TBRA was a consultant that will actually do the case management and processing, a subrecipient. And the other was someone to develop the policies and procedures for the program. If you recall, you did two contracts because the policies and procedures will be in place before the first day that TBRA takes off. That's one example. The other is the grants manual, which we are in the process of updating on a regular basis, which is going to have those policies and procedures in them moving forward. So I have shown you that there is a difference in my approach and than we have had in the past. For many years, we couldn't even do programming because we were so busy cleaning up the prior mess. But we are showing you moving forward that we are doing best practice, and that's what I would say.
And all of our program audits, I would say probably for the last 5 to 6 years,
Have been
demonstrating every single program audit that has come along in the last 5, 6 years has been impeccable. The only deficiencies in them are deficiencies that point to prior practices. And I think we're only down to now maybe one finding that still goes back decades that we're trying to clear. So we've been, and for those who are watching this that are saying, y'all have beat that horse to death, absolutely, because even when we beat a horse to death and we do it publicly, there's still a lot of misinformation and disinformation. So for the public record, I wanted to make sure that we, almost here, say like the pastors, exegeted but that we fully laid out and explained and had this very public conversation as to what some will try and make a controversial vote.
Thank you.
Is there have anything else? Okay, can we have a motion to,
Make a motion that the URA Agency Board adopt resolution 2025-010.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
aye?
Passes 5-0. Any other vote? No, okay. Motion passes 5-0. Next resolution is resolution 2025-11 to authorize the mayor to sign the grant closeout certification for 2016 home funds.
The traditionally, you have your fund open for a certain period of time, your grant fund open. And at the time to close it, you do a certification saying that you've done everything you can in closing it. This particular year, there are a few things that I would point out to. We received $371,551. We are allowing HUD to recapture $278,000. We dispersed $92,887. Again, in the same school as what we were just discussing about prior years and being able to get these programs in place with a procedure and policy. We didn't get home money out, which is more restrictive than the CDBG money by far, and has a limited purpose. So there is a recapture of a certain amount of money here, which is why we wanted to bring it to you publicly. The other thing is that we are certifying that to the best of our knowledge, we have followed the law, which of course we are trying to do that because I wouldn't be here if you guys weren't doing that. And I know you guys are doing that. So I would ask at this point in time, understanding those two things, that there is a reality that it's 2016 money, that even if we could, we can't spend that money because that money had a deadline of when it would be spent by. I would ask that you move forward and do approve the mayor signing the certification.
I make a
Hold
motion.
on the question. Do we have, okay, go ahead. Come on. Make them, before we had a
That's okay.
discussion before the vote.
Right,
So-
got you. I make a motion that we adopt resolution 2025-011.
Is there a second?
I second.
Is there a discussion?
On the question, I believe the last thing that we used the home monies for was the Monroe project, the Monroe, or was that the Choto money?
I don't know anything about that. When I went through, I didn't see any expenditures for home money in 2016 except admin. 2017 is later on the agenda, number B under 2B. But from looking backwards, I didn't see any expenditures in 2016 on home money.
So home monies, just so people understand, so that the board could also know, what can home monies be spent on?
The home investment partnership money is used specifically for housing, and it has to be affordable housing. And there's very strict rules at which how the unit must look. Like a certain percentage of it has to be under 50% or 60% home. It can be home ownership or rental, but there's very specific rules about its expenditures. It's often very difficult for a municipality to spend those funds. Usually there's three pieces to the home money. There's admin, which is 10% of the total. And then there's something called a CHOTO, which the mayor referred to before, which is a nonprofit agency that we can enter into an agreement with to spend the money. A typical CHOTO might be, if Grace Towers wanted to rehab their units, perhaps, for example, that could be a CHOTO. So a church, a nonprofit DV, those all domestic violence, all of those are potential CHOTOs.
Sam, just so the public's clear, these are monies coming from HUD,
Correct.
not City of Mount Vernon property tax levy money, HUD money that is being used essentially to rehab affordable housing or build.
Bill or
Or
rehab?
rehab in the city.
And mostly really build. They prefer build than they do rehab. There's a lot less limitations on build than there is on rehab.
And in 26, there was 371,000 and change, 2016, that was available to the URA. 92,000 was spent on admin and other costs, and the rest of the money was not used.
That's correct. That's correct.
And the challenge, as she said, is if you don't have the proper project, then you don't spend the money, because if you spend the money and you spend it improperly as not according to the rules, then you're gonna have to pay it back. And then there's also other rules and regulations around a home project that the money has to be awarded before the project goes into the ground, right? So, a few months ago, we might have been able to say, oh, we wanna spend this on a 115 or a 1 McQuestion or one, but once a project goes into the ground, if there's not enough time, then you can't give that money to them. The other challenge that we've always had traditionally with the home program is if you give money to a project, right? You give money to a project, that project says, we have 200 units, 5 units will keep affordable, and 5 units will keep affordable for the next 30 years. Each year, we have to collect financial information and do inspections of those units without any administrative money or staffing money to do it, right? And it historically in the past, what happened is the collection of the fiscal information for people living in those units over that 30-year period did not always happen, nor did the inspections happen. And historically, that's where the Urban Renewal Agency got into trouble with some home monies, right? And so one of the things that we've been talking about as we go forward, making sure that if we do anything around home monies, that we have the process in place, that these will be inspected by the building department, that there's some other entity who will be responsible for collecting the financial eligibility money and ensuring that the people who are in those units for the period of eligibility, whether it's 10, 20, or 30 years, that we are collecting that money and doing those annual financial certifications. No, that sounds like a lot, but I've done this work for 30 years, so I know it like the back of my hand. So
And I have to say that
it's not as easy.
weird because we have admin money spent in 2016 and not any actual project money spent. And the reason for that is exactly what the mayor said. That is that even if the project is from 2008 to 2028, usually it's a 20-year project, although we're trying to do 50 years now, we still have to do annual inspections. We still have to do requalifications before people move in. We have to have a nonprofit that does that work for us. So there are admin costs associated with that. So that would be why there's a disbursement without an activity for admin. So anyway.
Anything else on the question?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any other vote? Matter passes 5-0. The next item on the agenda is update on pending urban renewal agency projects. First would be the website revitalization.
So, I'm the new administrator. I come in and I say, does this make sense to me? And I looked at the website and I felt like it could be simpler for the person that doesn't know terminology. So I have met with our staff and we are developing a new sort of tree to make this as easy as possible for people so that it's a learning curve for them as opposed to them having to know what something means before they get on. So we're hoping in the next 2 months that there'll be an update, like a complete change on the website, the URA portion of the website, which will also be connected to the city website. And the goal is, again, communicating simply so that people who don't know terms can still figure something out.
User-friendly.
User-friendly, thank you, that's the word. Does anybody have any questions on that project? Okay. The next one is actually back to what we were just discussing for the 2016 issue. In 2017, we have some unspent funds, about $311,000. We have to get that money spent by a date certain. I believe it's 10 months so it's maybe June or July. And I have sent out requests for people who are in a position that they can have the money. This is a very quick turnaround. There is a project out there that has requested $600,000. They're willing to take our money, which is very nice. The question is, can we negotiate something with them? And we are in the process of negotiating with them so that we do not turn back money next year because we want to keep it with us.
So if we have 300 and something, how much money do
We
we
had $311,000
that were turned?
that we will turn back
Mhm.
by June, or I think it's like June 30th.
Mhm.
And what I'm hoping to do, when I put out to people that we have money, someone approached us, only one of the 4 or 5 that are possibly out there that could meet the time frame. Only one approached us and they requested 6. It's a senior complex with
The Wartburg.
it's the Wartburg.
It'll be the Walt Mead residence.
Yes.
Upgrade.
The rehab of the residents from a nursing facility to
They're changing it from a rehabilitation facility to apartments.
apartments.
And this will be the rehabilitation of that program. So will we be using 2017 and 2018 funds?
That's correct.
Okay, so
Because we have
let's start to catch up.
Yes,
We'll have
exactly.
Spend.
Once we're finalized, Pam, we'll bring it back to the board and.
Of course, yes. I mean, we have the negotiation. I'm reticent to talk about it too much because there's been only an initial consultation, but I did want you guys to know that we are looking at that because we do not want to turn back we don't want to recapture the HUD, and we want these funds out the door in a way that is a value to our residents, a value add to our residents.
So essentially the timeline we have on all of these are 8 years to spend.
Yes.
And sometimes what we've done actually, because it's better to give multiple year money. Oftentimes we hold money in the pocket. So you can say, well, you have a project that's ready to go. Well, we can, because 300,000 is almost like, why bother? For someone who's doing $100 million project, it makes it hard to get them to cooperate you ongoing because it's such a small amount. But when you can say we put 3 or 4 years of money together to support your project, then you have stronger seat at the table. You have a little more leverage in making sure that they're honoring the agreement that they made with you going forward. And then it's easier to just have one person track that one project instead of, since we don't get specific money to do that, then to track projects each year. It's just easier to have a multiple year allocation go to a significant project. Now, if we're doing something like housing rehabilitation for small houses or that wouldn't be with home money.
No,
You couldn't do that with home money. So all of the things that we would use this for is stuff that it should almost be like $1 million to really, really make it worth it. But they already have enough funding and this is the delta, the gap. So
yes, and these are the projects that were open came out of the county. The county had $100 million of flex money that they spent, or 90 million, I guess, by the end. So because we have this tight deadline, we only have 2 months. I mean, obviously, a project from beginning to end could take 2 years. And we've got to look at what has already been approved through the county, and in our case, through our land use process, which is why we had a limited number of projects that we can help with funding. So we will come back to you when we know, but I wanted you guys to have some information moving forward. Timeliness. So with CDBG money, we have a certain amount of, we have a 1.5% has to be available or less than that should be available in CDBG funds. In other words, every year they come in and they say, you haven't spent enough money. You're not spending fast enough. So we have a timeliness problem that's going to be coming up in June. We will have to do a report that says this is how we will get the money spent if we don't get it spent. So we have committed to capital projects, the fire stations in particular, and we are taking some funds and we are putting it into simple things like driveways, which are very costly, even though they're simple little projects, so that we can get this moving. And we're trying to do it under a certain amount so that we can move forward because we have this timeliness constraint. So I just wanted you all to be aware that our focus, we've done some street project money. Now we're going to be doing fire station money. And the next step after that will be, and we have a little bit of an emergency problem that we're dealing with, which is with one of the parking structures. And the next year we'll focus almost exclusively on fire stations and streets. So I did want you guys to know that. We may have to do a report to the HUD to say, we didn't get the funds spent on time, but this is how, and that is right now the strategy to get that money spent.
And there's no potential for them to recapture that money.
Not yet.
yeah, not yet.
It's the second year in a row. If we don't do it this year and we don't meet our obligations this year, next year they will recapture, which is why one of the things that was really important here is to do manageable projects. Because as you are all aware, our staff, especially our DPW staff, because these are infrastructure projects, are incredibly overstretched. So that's part of the strategy of doing small projects that will have an impact on our safety, but at the same time, they're manageable for the DPW.
And one of the reasons also that the money had not been spent in the timeliness guideline is because we were in the whole process of dealing with the Section 108 loan and how we were going to do that. Once we decided that, then we had to go out for all of the engineering studies. So the engineering studies came back in pretty much like January and February for the firehouses. And so now those, we don't have to look at the entire firehouse, but it gives us the ability to look at projects and break them down smaller so that we can get them done and have them moving project over project. So we didn't want to just, we could have taken that money and spent it on streets, spent it on something else. But we had already made a commitment to doing a larger scale firehouse rehabilitation as firehouses fall under HUD. Like police department, you can't do it there, but we could do it in firehouses, the Dole Center and places like that.
The next big fire station project, which will be with the 25 allocation, is going to be a pointing and roofing project at Fire Station 3. We've already chosen the funding and the project. It's a matter of getting that project ready to be sort of in the can so that we have 25 money getting it spent. That's one of the other things that we're doing a little differently, is that we're strategizing out hopefully at least a year. I'm hoping 5 years soon, but we're going to.
Now that we have the environmental, so that's the other step you have to do for HUD projects. You have to do what they call an environmental impact review, right? So you have to do an environmental impact study on the projects. And so we not only had to do the engineering reports, we had to do the environmental studies also. And so all of the engineering reports are done, all of the environmental studies are done, all of the cost analysis for those different projects are part of the engineering studies. And so now we move to procurement. So it's
Trying to line it up.
build up. It's if you do it right. And we're committed to doing it right. So right takes a little bit longer sometimes. And so we're right at the cusp of getting those projects in the ground.
So the next item is, and I don't know what time, we're getting close to time here. We have the URA manages the entitlement grant from HUD. We also collect funds from the county, which is HUD money, to provide housing services to residents of our community in need. That program falls under the continuum of care. We have a person that has been evicted from their house under one of our continuum of care programs. We are going to be writing a policy and procedure for the removal in the future. I am meeting with this person, and the plan at this point in time, because we had some concerns about due process for this person in terms of the past, is that we will move them to a different home, hopefully for a period of time. They will stay in the program as long as they can. And that we will, moving forward, not have to, once someone's been removed and evicted, have to deal with that again. We have some of the most difficult people in these programs that are struggling the hardest. When I say difficult, I mean they're struggling harder than others.
So the definition of a person eligible for the continuum of program is that they've had to be chronically homeless, meaning that you have to be homeless multiple times a year or for a certain number of years. You have to have a mental health issue, substance abuse issue, be a veteran, or be impacted by HIV, which are the what do you call it? Like the primary populations that they're the focus populations. Mental health, chemical addiction, veterans, aging, and HIV positive. Those are the primary, and then sometimes DV. So you already are dealing with a social challenge and a history of chronic homelessness, meaning that they're over and over and over again, right? So this is the population. So that's why it's called continuum of care or shelter plus care, because you're providing housing subsidies and you're providing case management programs. So it is a challenging population. And sometimes you have to do a lot of extra work.
And this is one of those. We want to do extra work because, once again, the best practice would have been to have a policy in place where we sat her down and we said, you're being evicted. This is our policy and procedure relating to that eviction. And we did not have that, which is why I'm keeping her in the program and moving on. You will see a policy and procedure for that because it's going to be written this week on the particular issue of an eviction. So I did want you guys to know, you may hear about it. The person is a 40-year resident of Mount Vernon, but does not currently live in Mount Vernon. So the next one is the landlord roundtable. One of the projects that I think we need to move forward on is, especially before the TBRA is in place, is to have conversations with landlords where we can sit down and say, if you have a vacant unit, please consider either our tenant-based rental assistance program or one of our COC clients. And so I'm going to be building with the county a landlord roundtable for Mount Vernon. If you have any thoughts about that.
That's a good program. And at the same time, I want to make sure that maybe make an exclusion for landlords based on our building department reports that have been slumlords, meaning that they have chronic complaints by tenants of the way they hold their housing. And if we can follow them up with reports from fire and PD on the numbers of times they've had to respond to those buildings and the conditions, right? Because I don't want the landlords who are slumlords, who love maximum rent for very little services, to be the people who are sitting around our landlord roundtable and they get some type of special relationship and say they're so open to receiving these very challenging residents when we know they have a history of providing poor service.
The line there, though, Mayor, is if we get them as part of the community with their peers sitting at a table, and maybe we can move that needle a little bit with them where they will start doing. So I don't want to exclude them per se, but I maybe won't place with them.
Right.
But, you know,
They can come, but
I would like to actually start building opportunities for them to clean up. And
they have to demonstrate that they have a standard.
Absolutely.
Because again, these are HUD certified units. Have to
Absolutely.
pass inspection. And if they can't pass inspection and they can't pass annual inspections or pop inspections, then we don't want to deal with them. I do not want to take people who are already vulnerable and place them in the care of slum landlords. And we are very, very clear and know who some of our slum landlords are here in Mount Vernon. And I don't think that they deserve a seat at the table until they prove and step up their game. But I understand and will respect them being invited. I just want to make sure that we're not placing anyone with negligent landlords in this city.
And for the record, before we put anybody into any unit, we do a quality inspection that has to be passed. We would never allow anybody into a unit that's not acceptable, which sometimes is a problem. Like even in my
only people who place them, right? The city of Mount Vernon is not the only people who place people.
You're 100% right.
There are other HUD-funded programs that instead of giving people a list in their community where they're issuing a voucher, they give them a list to Mount Vernon and they send them here. There are communities that have for 30 and 40 years, our partners, our neighbors who talk about our poor community, who constantly take their vulnerable population, and I don't like to use this term, but it is what happens. They dump them here.
Yeah,
They dump them here. And so we have far more people living in the city of Mount Vernon who have HUD subsidies that didn't originate from the city of Mount Vernon. Then we have far more people outside of our community who have transport HUD vouchers who are living in our community. I have said for the past 30 years, all the way back to when I worked for Mayor Davis, that it is inflating our housing market, because when you're paying $3,000 for an apartment on 3rd Street because they have Section 8, then what does that do to the apartment on Lincoln Avenue? Or what does that do to an apartment somewhere else? So the housing market in Mount Vernon has been unfairly inflated because of the proliferation of HUD-funded vouchers that come from our surrounding communities that are put here in Mount Vernon, and we have to put an end to that
That's
type
interesting.
of dump-off. And I have the statistics to prove it.
I totally. What's interesting about that is that we can't one of the preferences with HUD is that residence isn't one, like it's 6 counties. So if we have a Mount Vernon resident that comes to me with a housing problem, I can only promise them that I can provide them a list of housing, but most of the time it's not in Mount Vernon because we don't have the units available. So it's interesting that you're saying that. There may be some things we could be doing in future home projects that we need to explore. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor. Because I get what you're saying. So I was approached by Mike Montes, who is our emergency response director, about the problem we have, which are that we displace about 2,200 people a year based on emergencies like fire, and that we have no place for them to go. So 2,200 is a lot of people. I was kind of shocked.
Well, because a lot of them are living in illegal units and basement units and attic units and things of that nature. And when they move in there, they know they're illegal, but they move in there because
There's no place.
house.
Yeah. So what I'm going to be doing is putting together a meeting with the county to discuss moving forward. We need to have emergency housing. When I say we, the county, Mount Vernon in particular, our residents need to be protected. So I'm going to see what we can be doing to figure out a way to stop, at least mitigate this displacement of 2,200 people. That's not acceptable to me. So I wanted you to know that was coming. And economic development, the URA sits on an economic development task force or commission. And I have handed out to all of you the first step on the revenue analysis. I particularly wanted Dr. Morton and the mayor to see this because one of the things that we are discussing is moving toward understanding what our actual costs are to do business. And the way to do that is to create an hourly rate based on what it costs us to provide a service. And then once we do that, we need to identify services. Then we need to identify what the expenditures are for those services. And we'll know the revenue, we'll know the expenditures, and we'll know how much we are offset. So I am handing out, just for your information, and you can look at it and you can give me your thoughts on it, and those, you two in particular, about what the hourly rates are for the first 2 departments, which is building and planning. In the long run, we'll be doing DPW and other departments that affect economic development.
It's just a comprehensive budget development of URA's operation.
This is so the URA is participating on an economic development committee for the city. And this is a comprehensive city approach for revenue by looking at economic development. And how the ultimate outcome of what the URA participates in doesn't, the ultimate outcome of how we do that is going to be on the city council's board. So I'm just trying to give you a preview of what might happen.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments before we close? Only 10 minutes late.
Motion to adjourn?
Controller and director, and I know we have Ms. Patterson here. Where are we right now with the latest audit? We're in 2020?
Yes,
And in 2020, we've handed over whatever materials they've asked for.
yes, we went over all of the, sample stage. All of the samples have been, uploaded to the portal. So at this point, haven't received any additional requests from the, auditors. So we're going to take from them. Hopefully we won't have even more requests for transformation. So we can wrap that up. And of course, the write-off will be,
Bad.
back debts. That would be the best thing last piece of it. So I will do the journal increase into them and hopefully we can wrap up. So we can, little bit of the CPAs can wrap it up and before that. And then meanwhile, 2020, working on that, 21. working-
And 21, I think And Controller, you could confirm this. 21 should be a little bit easier, because is that when we created the account in the clerk's office? So we were able to send HUD money to the clerk's office, so it wouldn't be returned by the prior controller to HUD? Okay. So this should be probably the final year of very, very difficult audits. And then 2021 should be a little bit easier. And then 2022, when our current controller came into office, it all became much more seamless. Okay,
It's also the pandemic year, so
Yes, that affected it.
it's across the board. It's very difficult to manage.
we had a pandemic and a whirlwind.
So
That's mainly in whirlwinds.
just for the full record, March 31st, committed to getting the deliverables to the auditors for 2020. We met that commitment. It's totally in the auditor's hands. If they want us to do more or less on 2020, they will send us something and we will respond because it's now in their hands. We are working diligently on 2021, which will be due at the end of May. And we have no reason to believe that that will not be done on time because, again, we should be in a better position than before. So we are moving along on the audits.
And testing, they always ask for other things, but it reminds me that I look at testing like this. When we grew up, we used to get mimeograph papers full of math questions, right? And you either prove that you know it, you can have 20 problems that prove that you know it,
Right,
but sometimes people used to give you 100 to keep you busy.
right.
Right? So, I think we even need to have conversation sometime about the testing, because my question is the testing always necessary at the level in which we go to sometime, or sometimes is the testing busy? So that's a conversation that I also want to have respectfully.
That's.
I mean, and that's what audits do, when historically we'd been behind, right? So that was always easy to say, oh, they're behind. But now that we've caught up, if you might be behind, then you just continue to test.
Well, particularly on something like that, the way we put a contract together
Mhm.
helps that move because we did a flat rate with the auditors. It's not in their best interest to do more than their ethical obligation, to overtest us, if you will. We have a flat rate that we pay them that much if they do 600 things or they do 20 things.
And
So they should be doing what is ethically correct, which I believe they
and
are.
it's necessary to prove.
And what is necessary and nothing more. And that's part of why you go to a flat rate contract just for those purposes.
Perfect. Thank you. That will eliminate some of those practices.
I hope so.
Hope so. Thank
Do we
you.
have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in